Okay, so we'll go ahead and get this thing going. It's 7 o'clock. So, well, hi. I just wanted to touch base real quick. This is one of our new Fisher's history chats, and very excited. We're doing it here together in my office. Doug Roush is an expert in the military of the tell me what the
It's the 19th U.S. regular. So there is a 19th Indiana, and it was state supported, but the 19th regulars, it was headquartered here in 61, right after they fired on Fort Sumter, and they were raising units for the regular infantry. So they eventually went on. There still is one. There still is a regular infantry at 19th U.S. in Fort Benning, Georgia. They still exist. All the state-supported ones disappeared right after the Civil War ended, and the U.S. regulars went out west to do some work with the Native Americans out there.
Well, very good. So tell me, now I know that you do a lot of different things. You used to do a lot of stuff with Conner Prairie, is that correct?
Right.
Okay. And like the reenactments up there and stuff?
We used to do reenactments when they had those, but we've been involved with the Symphony on the Prairie and presenting the colors during the 4th of July ceremony or Independence Day. And it's been, we're pushing about 27 years of this. They've invited us back every year. We've gone, in that length of time, people have had hip surgeries, knee surgeries. But a lot of guys are continuing to move, and we dress in a full military uniform of 1857. So we have, what the Black Hats or the Indiana Iron Brigade, they were wearing the regulation uniform, although they dumped out on the dark blue uniform trousers. We still have those. They went to the sky blue. Money costs and indigo dye and all that kind of issues. But there's the difference. Our dress uniform is still all dark blue. And the black hat is something that you'll hear referenced in the 19th Indiana, as they wore the full dress hat of the time. And but we'll be out at Conner Prairie, and we'll be out there 3rd, 4th, and 5th, and we will be presenting colors during the theme of to Gettysburg. Very moving. Just outdoors. You have the symphony, who is excellent. They're very nice to have us back every year, and they're excellent in their music. But when they play the theme to Gettysburg, and you're marching down, and it's the sun is beginning to set, and it's an outdoor venue. I mean, the hair in the back of your neck just stands up. It's an honor to do that and to be invited back year after year now.
So now on the you also do stuff at Gettysburg as well too.
Yes, we used to. With people retiring, they're not replacing them, so the staff is not the same as it used to be. But they had 65 units that would come in during the summer. We would be one of those, and we had the only unit in the country that would retire the colors at the National Cemetery. It took a little doing to get that accomplished. I wrote, Department of the Interior, I wrote, the Army, and they couldn't figure out what to do with this. So they said, you'll need to talk to one of the liaisons at Gettysburg. I said, well, okay, we've gone this far, let's go a little bit further. And it was an interesting story. Finally got to a park ranger. He said, I'm gonna have to go with you. And I said, fine, that's great with us. And I said, there are no firearms in the National Cemetery, and there's a sign saying no firearms. But Tom, we're a color guard. We're historically based. He's like, yeah, I kind of thought that too. And he said, well, as long as I go with you, it'll probably be okay. And then I threw the little extra in. I said, and we'll be fixing bayonets. He goes, oh, yeah, okay, okay, okay. Let's see how this goes. So we, did the ceremony. We lowered the colors, and he said, I saw that people were taking pictures of the event. Yeah, friends. He goes, I'll need those pictures, and I'll need to know who's in the unit, like annotated, who is where. I'm going, oh my goodness, we're going to be in jail, and they have to identify us. And he said, no, this hasn't been done since 1933. I believe that was the year. And he said, the last time the colors have been lowered in a military fashion was in the 1930s, when it changed over from military installation to the Department of the Interior. He said, you are now part of park history.
Wow, that's very cool.
Yeah. So, but then, like I said, they've cut the number of people. They retired. They haven't been replaced, and so they've cut the number of summertime units that go, and we just couldn't keep the numbers up. You have to have like 20 rifles online to demonstrations, and so we were left on the cutting room floor. But I remember him saying, not if you come back, but when you do, would you do this color ceremony again? I mean, we were, white gloves, full dress uniform, just like we'd be wearing out at Conner Prairie.
So how did you get started all this?
We started with like four guys. The reason why we wanted to pick not a state supported, but a federally funded unit was the U.S. Raiders never get any press much. It's always about the hometown people, and they join together, and you never hear too much about it's a very small group of guys. It was a drop in a bucket to what the volunteers would raise. So they had a story to tell, and we met with Mark Johnson, and he wrote this book, and it is pretty hefty. And he was a West Point grad, and he got interested in the regulars of the Civil War, and so we got copies, and it's an interesting story, and we would be our Gettysburg was Stones River. It was a Western theater, and the 19th U.S. was all mostly Western. A few of our companies from the book would go out to, they'd be in Antietam, mostly as a guard capacity, but a couple, C&D companies were out there. And one of the first jobs that the first company was raised here in Indianapolis was to go down to the Circle before there was a monument, and they would be guarding because they were afraid of Confederates coming in and wanting to take the treasury. They needed money, and they thought, man, Indianapolis is pretty well off. So they were afraid that the citizens were afraid that Indianapolis would be a target. So they took these guys, and they probably had fired a few shots and target, and they put them downtown and on the Circle where they could be seen. And the people would go, oh, well, I guess there are troops here. So, and that was our first job as the 19th U.S.
Now, who was involved with like Arsenal Tech and all that kind of stuff? I know we had a prison camp here. We had all kinds of other stuff going on.
Yeah. Well, then, the camp here was usually you would have older soldiers or veterans who had been wounded and couldn't participate in battles anymore, but they would make those into guards. So the one here on 19th Street was it was a fairly well run early on. Matter of fact, there were a bust was paid for by the Confederates who were under Robert Owen, and one of those is in the State House, and one is in Bloomington. So they thought well enough of him, and it went down after he left. I mean, it became more and more people, more and more issues with the citizenry, because he would let them to do work in the town. It let them to have knives. Well, that was a tool, not really a weapon. People were kind of put off by that, but yeah, and they returned to camp. They would, it's like, well, okay, this is not too bad, but it got worse. Most camps, just couldn't keep up with the money, keep up with the drudgery of it. And but Owen ran a very good um, prison camp, and the soldiers, that were interned there did do well, and they, like I said, they raised money to give him a bust.
That's very cool. Now, on the 19th, you said that it was really kind of based, it was federal troops, but it was based in Indiana. Where was the base?
I don't know the
Oh,
building, but it was headquartered here. Then it moved up into Michigan, and they what was it, Fort Detroit, and they weren't in World War I or II. They were a training camp, just like today down in Fort Benning. They train troops to be deployed. So it is a unit that still exists. I have been in contact with several of the lieutenant colonels, and they were very interested that there is a group out here that patterned themselves after the 19th, and it's an anytime you do something in a reenacting unit, you always dig into the history, and it just pulls you in. Once you start reading diary entries, then things become more and more alive. You just get down the rabbit hole with it. The history is very compelling.
out of the different people that actually were there and doing it firsthand through the
Exactly.
process. I know that learning through doing some ancestry stuff, I learned that my two times great grandfather was in the 80th volunteer out of southern Indiana.
Uh-huh.
And so, he went through quite a few. I was able to track what battles they were in, which they were in some pretty high profiles. What was 19? Where was 19? Where did they go through the Civil War?
Yeah, they were Western theater.
Okay.
The 19th Indiana went out east, but we were brigaded by Rosecrans to the 15th and 16th, 18th and 19th regiments were pooled together. He wanted like an iron fist when he had to have it. If things went sour, he wanted a group of regulars who would be possibly better trained, more. They had strict discipline. Matter of fact, they got into fistfights with volunteers because the volunteers say, you're treating that man badly. You're too strict, and they actually became into fistfights with volunteer units.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
there you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they under Rosecrans through the whole war, or were they, because I know that mine in the 80th, there was a point where they were under Burnside. There was a
Yeah.
point they were under Hooker. There was a point they were under Grant, and then they were under Sherman when they went down through all the way, to finish up the war. So down through Atlanta and what have you.
After Chickamauga, it had almost been shot to pieces. The highest ranking officer was a lieutenant. Matter of fact, that it's the founding date, May 5th. They have games. The 19th gets like a picnic, kind of a aura about it, and they pick a lieutenant to run the regiment because of the history involved. At Chickamauga, they were shot down like just a skeleton of who they were. They couldn't get any more volunteers to do regular infantry, and they became like at Lookout Mountain. They just became a kind of a police force.
Well, we have some people here that may or may not be, Civil War history nerds. So, when you talk about the Western theater, where do you describe that?
It would be going down from the Ohio to Kentucky, Tennessee, Georgia, in that area. They didn't go out towards Virginia, Maryland, and that was, there's almost like two separate theaters of war.
Right.
And things around Washington and Richmond, they stalemated and back and forth. But the Westerners were very instrumental in the Civil War. They I read one account that the Confederates just were confounded by the Westerners. They were hard bitten. They were farmers, and they were people who were working almost in forests or farms, but there were a harder group of people. They didn't live in the cities. There were no really big cities, so you made your living by hard work. And they said, we threw dead carcasses in the pools and water, and those guys just pulled them out, took a cup, and drank it anyway. They couldn't figure these guys out. But also, who was it? George Thomas. He wanted more regulars. I mean, more Westerners in his Iron Brigade. The Michigan, Indiana, Wisconsin kind of guys, because they were a little bit, difficulties didn't seem to really bother them too much. Discipline did. He wanted them to wear leggings, white leggings, and they pretty much rebelled against it. And one day he went out and his horse had leggings everywhere. They put leggings everywhere they're not supposed to be. And he kind of got the point, like, yeah, I think that may be a bit too far. So he would want to keep the integrity of a Western unit under him, and it was probably a good thing. I mean, it would eventually, towards the end of the war, of course, everybody gets mixed up. New regiments and brigades would be thrown together. That didn't usually happen because they wanted this to be not a territorial regimental kind of battle units. They wanted all these to be kind of put together from different parts of the country to make it like it is a union. It is and get away from just very segmented and territorial kind of raising regiments.
I just finished a series of books by a guy named Conrad Richter, written in the 40s, and it's history fiction, okay. But you were just talking about the Western Territory, which is like the Northwest Territory, Ohio, Kentucky,
Exactly.
whatever, Indiana. That was what that whole thing is about. It starts off with a book called The Trees, where they come out to these major forests and they start having to literally cut their way in. Then they had the fields because they cut the trees away, and then they had the towns when the towns started popping up. It was really well done. It really explains and gives you a feel of the culture of what these, you look at the Indiana State Seal and you look at them cutting down the trees, right? That's part of what this was all about. It was, they say a squirrel could walk all the way from like, all the way across
South Carolina
to here to the Mississippi River. Well, that it's changed obviously a great deal, but those are the hard stock of the people that you were talking about. Yeah.
Yep. The very you look back at that and it's hard to imagine trains of horses and baggage trains, and matter of fact, we wear shoulder scales, so they're brass on each shoulder, and they were supposedly meant to stop a saber blow from a mounted horseman. It would glance off supposedly, and then it became something decorative and something you'd have to polish. And doing so, you'd probably swear at. Mm-hmm. And somewhere in the middle of the Southern campaign, they had baggage issues, so they didn't have any place to put them or any place to carry them, so they dumped them down a latrine. And it came Sunday for dress parade, and General said, you gentlemen are out of uniform. Yes, sir. And I said, where are your scales? We dumped them for want of baggage, sir. He goes, have them next time. It didn't happen. He got, reprimanded, but they knew this is the West. Those shoulder scales weighed a lot. And, let's look at this thing objectively.
Yeah.
They're not that useful.
Mhm.
So they eventually, and I'm trying to think of his name. He went through the war thinking he's going to get court-martialed. Up until the end, nothing was ever done. He was never brought up on any kind of charges, but he had that hanging over him like, when's it going to drop?
Yeah.
When's it going to happen? And it was a pretty good story. He just sweat that out for the rest of the war.
I think Lincoln was happy with the Western theater.
Yes.
That's where all the winning was taking place.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, Grant,
Yeah.
he was a Westerner.
Yeah. Well, he was Missouri.
Yeah.
So it's and that's, oh my God, if you've not read Grant by Ron Chernow, I cannot recommend that high enough. That is
Even Mark Twain said, I wish I could have written that myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So because and then Twain and well, basically was the publisher of his autobiography, which was phenomenal as well. So great books. If you've not read, and I will tell you this, Grant won the war, he won the peace, and then he lost the history because Woodrow Wilson hated him because he was a child of the South and rewrote history. So
Woodrow's not high on my list. So
well, he's like the biggest lost causer, So anyway. So, and then because of that, most of us grew up and didn't know any of this stuff.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything about Grant. I mean, I remember hearing he was more or less a drunk and that Lee basically walked on water. And then you started doing some research and found out, well, that is anything but true. So, but
there are so many stories like that that have just been passed on and passed on. And when you get into reading, I'll say, wait, that's not what I was taught in school.
Right.
Yeah. Those are, kind of easy out kind of little touches of history that aren't necessarily true.
In our schools for 100 years, we were taught basically from the three volume set American History by Woodrow Wilson, and he was a child of the South during the Civil War. And his mom wouldn't even come to DC because she wouldn't go to that Yankee city, So it's kind of like, his history was showing that, and that's what most of us grew up on. Okay, so you had to do research outside to learn other things. Grant was the most popular person probably on the planet when he was alive, when he died, and then he just kind of disappeared from history after that. So
well, it's like the press will say things that will generate what they want you to think.
Right.
Even, I mean, when Lincoln gave the Gettysburg Address, papers of the day say, how terrible.
Yeah.
And other papers would say it was a masterstroke. And what was it? 272 words. And the photographer was unready to take his picture. He was sitting down as the he clicked the shutter because who was the other guy? Spoke a couple hours. And never got to the point that Lincoln also said, I look at the Declaration of Independence and I get politically everything from that one document that I can refer to, or words to that effect. But and then from that Gettysburg Address, Dwayne, what is his name? Every year he will recite the Gettysburg Address, and at Conner Prairie, and you're standing there and you hear those words, and he has a higher register in his voice. Supposedly that was like Lincoln's itself, but he is dressed. He's on and off the stage quickly, and you're going, golly, I could imagine what it would have been like standing there. Listening to those words and think, oh, that's it. He's done. It's an amazing feeling to be outdoors and with music and with thousands of people. Sometimes we've had 12, 14,000 out there, and as you're marching down that center aisle, and you start to see people stand as the colors come past. And we have our 19th regular, regimental colors. And then we had a new one made by Stephen Hill. Steve had a job here at one time. He was here in Indianapolis, and he is a flag maker. At one time, I call it, like, "Hey, Steve, I noticed some flags from a movie, and it was Last of the Mohicans." And I said, "Boy, those were really nice looking, and they were, in the breeze. They were." He goes, "Yeah, I made those." Oh my goodness! So I talked him into, say, "Hey, can you make us a 19th U.S. National?" He goes, "Yeah, let me research it." So he calls up West Point. He goes, "You got any documentation on the 19th regulars?" He goes, "Yeah, we got a pencil drawing." I goes, "Close enough." So he went right through the source, found what they would have carried, the star pattern. Um, uh, it's nice to have people who are talented and willing to make your history look even better. It's just not, well, this is close enough. It looks like history.
Yeah.
We research the uniform. What did they actually wear? How was it worn? Of course, we polish, and they refer to that in the book. That yeah, it didn't last long. Of course, you're out in wilderness, but we polish because that's what they said they did. They kept the muskets armory bright. So we tend to, for events like this, we do what they said they had done.
Bring it back to life.
Yeah.
As we're talking about some of the different things, one of the things, there's a book that I don't know if you've ever read or not. If you haven't, I strongly recommend it. It's an autobiography or biography by Admiral David Porter.
I haven't read that one. No.
Oh my God, it is one thing I didn't realize. He is hilarious. He's really
no.
Yeah.
He doesn't look it in a portrait.
I know he is a smart aleck to no end. I would laugh out loud throughout that whole book because he was pulling all these pranks. He's phenomenal, but he had some insight that no one else on earth had. He was he basically took Lincoln with him when they went down to after the battles, where they've taken over Virginia, and so Richmond, and so he was staying in David's Porter's cabin for that time with just the two of them. And so the conversations they had and some of the things he saw with, like when Lincoln wanted to go right after they took Richmond, he wanted to go and see the people. So he and Porter walked up the bank and they were completely swallowed by all these, well, I guess it would be newly freed slaves because of this.
I've heard that excerpt. Yeah.
And so Porter's telling this story, firsthand eyewitness to something that no one else really got to see.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just amazing. I recommend it really, because like I said, stories I had never heard because two men were there. So that was kind of a cool thing.
And to read those makes that history come alive even more.
Yeah.
You can start to visualize it. You can it lets you in on the humanity of it.
Yes.
Which even the one thing that gets me is you like, okay, so the Confederate and Union, I mean, we both spoke the same language. Most of us had the same religion, the same culture, the same understanding about the founding of the country. So it really wasn't like true enemies, because if something would happen, matter of fact, I'm reading Antietam, trying to think of the author. He's it won't come to me, but anyway, color sergeants and Confederates coming across the field at Antietam notices color sergeant for a Union regiment taking a hit in the knee, was down, and he said, "You're in a bad area. Let me get some." So he helped pile some wood up around him. I mean, these guys were enemies, but there was that understanding that he's wounded.
Right.
So he said, also, said, here's my canteen, wash out that wound, take a drink, I've got to move on with my regiment. And supposedly wasn't, 15 minutes, he's coming back. They're being repulsed.
Yeah.
And he said, could I have my canteen back?
Yeah.
Yes, that's kind of kindly.
Yeah.
But I'm going, it's hard to understand what, like the two cultures of North and South, but when it came to like a wounding, you were no longer that dreaded enemy.
Right.
Like many accounts I've read like that.
There's a series of books. I've got a 4-volume set that I was actually lucky enough to get my hands on, and it's the American Century. It was like their 20th anniversary of the Civil War. They did a thing, and that's really what got Grant writing, is because he agreed to write some articles for them.
Right.
And from that, he was convinced to do his autobiography. But those books are so fun because they've got the generals from both sides of the battle telling the story of the battle. And you're getting firsthand from both sides. So you're getting, it's really, very, very interesting to read. So, yeah. So the 19th, they're still around. Okay.
Yeah.
So, when, we didn't really have any battles in Indiana other than probably
Gordon,
Corydon, which my 2-time grandfather was involved in.
I wondered about, but there were high numbers. I thought that sounds like they would be involved in that.
Yeah, so they were chasing. That was one of the last things he did, was chasing John Morgan, who I don't know if that was relative or not, across, from which I think he finally got taken out in Illinois, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So, but they chased
Ohio,
him. Oh, it was Ohio. Okay. So I knew they chased him into another state, and he got caught. That's why they finally got him. But those are some things that just amaze me, is when you go through and you start reading these and you start getting different perspectives. And I know very little about my 2 times great grandfather. I know his name. I know what battles he was in, because I know when he was mustered in and when he was mustered out, and what they did. Okay, so that's easy to figure out. The only anecdote I have of him, I knew he was a farmer. Only anecdote I had was, I had an older cousin who knew my great grandmother that I didn't really, and she said that her only story about her late father-in-law was that he'd get so drunk he had a mule that knew how to get him home. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's, I don't know if that's true or not, that type of thing, but that's the only anecdote I have. But then when I read the battles that they were in, okay, and and then reading the histories of them, and reading, Grant's autobiographies, and reading these things, there were battles where they were standing 5 deep on their dead comrades in these trenches and stuff. There's where the entire battlefields where you couldn't step without stepping on someone. How you would come out of that without having some issues, I wouldn't have any idea.
Well, they said that, these guys, after they came home, they would go on benders. They'd disappear for, days and then come back. But they're trying to clear the mind. And that's when they said the regimentals histories came out, because they were fleshing out, all those, thoughts. And they recorded, just like, I got to get this out of my head. So a lot of those regimental accounts were from those guys who were afterwards like, they got to get through this. And, they didn't know what PTSD, they didn't know, there was no terms for that. They just endured it.
Yeah. And we're talking, I think when I was looking through the different battles during really about a month period of time, the wilderness was involved in that. There were different ones. It was like 100,000 of the troops, perished during that time frame. I just can't imagine anyone, walking through that process.
I mentioned a moment of like humanity. It was in trying to think where it was, Kennesaw Mountain, I think it was, and it was a 3-mile front, kind of in the middle of it. It was in the fall, and the musket, firing would start setting leaves on fire, and the Union had guys out burning up in the leaves.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, stop. okay, and said, "We'll help you drag your guys out of the fire."
Mhm.
And I just have to stop and I mean the battle's going on each side.
Right.
I think it was General Cheatham, and they handed him like souvenir pistols and thank you very much, and then okay, let's go
Go
back
back
at it.
to we go back to battle. So it's
Unbelievable stuff.
the stories are they're almost more than fiction, but they're not. That's the thing that what these people had gone
Well,
through,
yeah, Hollywood would make that.
and you wouldn't believe
They
it.
didn't. No, it didn't happen.
Yeah. So but it was fascinating when you start reading that. And that's like I said, for me, I didn't know him, but if he was coming home drunk on his mule, I wouldn't. It's kind of hard to blame
No,
him.
I used to go down to the monument a lot and talk about the architecture and the carvings and that kind of stuff. And one guy, he was from Michigan, I think it was, talked about his great grandfather, great, and he'd run off to war, didn't tell his dad. So he was mustered out. He was coming back up off the Ohio, coming through, and he thought, "How am I going to tell my dad? How's this going to turn out?" Because I took off, and he stayed in the old hotel right there on the Circle. And
Okay. Columbia Club or
no, it
no?
wasn't. It was on the other side of the street.
Okay.
Like trying to decide how do I how do I tell my how do I get back in good graces with my father, and once he got back, it's like he was home.
Yeah.
Didn't matter.
You made it home.
Yeah, but he had that. But when you're downtown and people tell you stories like that,
Right.
and you're going, you're lucky enough to hear them.
Oh yeah. It's just fascinating with all the different things that have gone through and what people had to do and what they had to survive through. A friend of mine is a historian, and he actually is a Civil War. I mean, hardcore. He's published 2 books on it. Okay,
Oh,
and
okay.
so one of the ones that he wrote was actually the diary of his 2 times great grandfather, who was in Andersonville. Okay, and it's a hard read. It's a very
Have
difficult
you been
read.
there?
No, I have not. But
That's
oh,
yeah.
oh my God, just reading it, it was brutal. It was like every page you're going, oh God, do I really want to read this next page?
Yeah.
And what they went through, what he went through, and from the book, he never he never recovered. He lived a longer time. He ended up in Central State, because he couldn't get out of that prison. The prison had gotten into his head, and that was where he was. But it was a very different. I mean, it's almost impossible to read that without just having your humanity beaten to death. It was a tough place. So
And my great grandfather, 3 greats, um, he was Western theater and caught malaria, and he would drive an ambulance, and then he'd get better.
yeah,
Then he'd go back shoulder a musket. Um, that's a tough kind of person,
yeah.
and that was like that indicative of being that Western hard kind of individual. Um,
Well, we owe these people, a lot, and I love the fact that you're keeping them alive, so to speak. You're bringing the imagery to people,
yeah,
and give them a little bit of a little taste, because I think that as a society we do not teach history anymore. If we do, it's such a cursory glance
yeah,
that people don't realize, and I've always thought that we teach it so poorly because they teach dates and places and stuff, and who cares? The stories of the people and what they did and what they accomplished and what they strove for. That's where history comes alive. That's where it's like for me with doing the ancestry thing. What happened with that was, and it's a rabbit hole you could fall in, so it can suck you in. But my son did an ancestry on us before my father passed and be able to gave us here it is, and here's the names, dates, and places. And we're like, that's fascinating because I'd never heard 90% of these names and whatever. And then you put it in a drawer because it's names, dates, and places. It's boring. Okay. It's really what it comes down to. Well, eventually there's a TV show called, or there was called Who Do You Think You Are? I think
yeah, right, yeah.
Ancestry.com, I think was
Hmm.
sponsoring it. And I was watching it. The only reason I wanted to be a celebrity was to have somebody take me back and find all these people, and they take you to the different places. So I decided to start trying to do. I had the numbers, the names because they were there. So I decided to take the Morgan side and try to put stories behind them. And so I just started Googling names, and I'm getting nothing. I mean, I didn't know if I was going to get horse thief hung. I mean, I didn't know, yeah, whatever. So I'm just kind of Googling names, and all of a sudden, I'm getting nothing, 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 nothing. And then all of a sudden, my fourth, fifth, and sixth, which is really difficult because all of them have the same name, so that becomes really challenging. But the internet blew up, and so I learned a lot about them. And then I was able to backfill some of the other ones, and I started going down to some of the different. I found out where they were, and then I went down to the counties and pulled death records and
Right.
found different things. Um, and if you've not gone to Fort Wayne to the answer,
I know of, yeah,
unbelievable. I
yeah.
grossly underestimated how much time I was going to need to be there, but I contracted a historian, and she did help me find out some things about some people I couldn't find any stories to. But Fort Wayne has the second largest
Yeah.
ancestry library in the
Yep.
nation, next to the Mormons
Yep.
in Salt Lake. So, but that's that. I mean, it's just so like I said, just trying to find this. Now, who'd you say wrote that book?
Johnson, he was major at that time, and I lost track of him. He went to he went to Michigan, but Mark Johnson, and it's well done, it's well written.
That Body of Brave Men.
Yeah.
By Mark Johnson.
Yeah. But quickly back to the Symphony on the Prairie.
Yeah.
You meet people. You meet veterans from Vietnam, and when you say welcome home, I mean they tear up.
Yeah.
You seem to project something that they can identify with. I've met guys who were first wave at Normandy. I met B-17 pilots over the 8th Air Force. I mean, it brings, like you said, it brings life to it. You read about it, but then we had trying to think, it must have been 40 medals of honor one time out at Conner Prairie. I happened to be that year. I was the color sergeant, and I remember we made a retrograde move, and I'm looking at blue ribbons in the front row. I knew what pucker factor meant at that moment. And they were very appreciative. And I said, I've read your citation, because yeah, that was okay. What are you doing? This looks good. Keep doing what you're doing. But they held a mirror up, bounced it back at you.
Yeah.
That's who these people are.
Right.
But a guy came up to me 2 years ago, and he's said, I recognize you from a photograph. So, well, could be. He goes, no, my dad had his picture taken with you. It was his favorite picture. He passed away. I thought I'd tell you what that photograph meant. Like, you don't know how you touch people sometimes.
Right.
You just have your picture taken. Hey, thanks. Nice meeting you. And they're gone. And then something like this comes back, and think, maybe this is important to do.
Yeah. Well, it is important to do. It's basically keeping things alive for the next generation, so they can see what's going on. I was going to do something real quick. I was going to go ahead and get us where we can see some of your pictures and stuff too.
Yeah.
Do a screen share. Let's see what I can find here. So we've got. I'll let you explain what we see here. Okay. Okay.
That is from Conner Prairie and the Symphony on the Prairie years ago, but the guys look pretty good there. I mean, they're present arms, and during the national anthem, and that was when you hear the anthem, I mean, you stand a little straighter, you walk a little better. You're part of the show.
Yeah.
You are a performer, but also you're representing something that was historically in our cult history. So it is it's an important thing. You 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 put this on, and all of a sudden, yeah, it means something a little bit more. You try to do it as best you can, uh, and we have a manual of arms right out of the book. We go by it, um, and yeah, that's been several years ago, but good color. That's the old flag.
Yeah.
But our regimentals are still around. Yeah, what's the next one?
I'm trying to find it
Yeah,
here.
okay. Now that's a St. Patrick's Day, and that is the new flag. You can see the old
Yeah.
and this is on, looks like, New York Street. Every time yeah, well, no, we're coming up Meridian. I like it because the monument is in the
Oh, yes,
background.
you can see it back there.
Yeah, and I mean, those color bearers, that breeze is snapping those colors, and they're fighting those things.
Yeah.
We usually on New York we get hit as soon as we make a right wheel, boom, the wind just funnels down, and these guys are really hanging on and trying to control them.
Does this say something right here?
Yeah, that is 19th U.S.
Oh, okay.
Regulars Regiment. Now, they didn't put on, like most volunteers would put, the battles they'd been in and be lettered on those. But since it's a little bit anachronistic, but we have the battle streamers.
Right.
Since we represent a unit that is still around, they are blue and gray, and they are the battles that the 19th would have been involved with. So we have streamers and not lettered on the flag itself.
Okay, that makes sense.
Now when the Medal of Honor recipients were here, they were in the 500 parade. This was at the old Bush Stadium, and we were the color guard. And all we could think of, I mean, we were, man, you talking about tight. All these Medal of Honor recipients were looking at the colors coming out, and we're just thinking, how many of those guys must have been drill sergeants? And you're just like, oh my.
So you want to be standing tall.
Yeah. And you wanted everything to be perfect,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, because they would notice.
Now that,
Oh, sorry.
that image, like I said, that was early on. We found history that we had dark blue trousers. Here, the last image you saw was light blue trousers.
Right, sure.
So here in 1858, that was the uniform. It was the dark frock coat and trousers. And then 61, they changed and went to the sky blues. Here is Brigadier General Copes, and I was walking down. I saw him on the stage, and I stopped and I saluted. And he was like, "Okay, this is an interesting uniform." And he came out, and he was wearing a white short sleeve shirt. And he goes, "Where are you guys?" I said, we're up at the top of the hill, etc., etc. He goes, "Give me a minute. I'll come up." And he puts on his uniform, his jacket, and went first rate. And he talked to us, like 5 or 10 minutes. And one of our guys said, "That's it. I'm joining." He became captain, and because of listening to that gentleman, Major General Copes, he joined.
Wow.
And
now, is Copes with the 19th or is
no?
Okay.
Yeah.
I just didn't know if it was that as well. Let's see who else we have
But I
here.
was lucky enough to be out front and shake it. This is Gettysburg, and you'll see that cannon to the right there. That is at the angle in Cowan's Battery, and it was snapped just perfect to get that piece of artillery at the same time we were walking by. Now this is in October, and it always windy, and those flags are hard to control. But we had you know, every year for 20, I guess it was 26 years, we went out and marched from, it was a mile and an eighth from the Pennsylvania Monument all the way up, and there's a slight grade uphill, and you think, we can do that. Well, after a while,
You start feeling it.
one time they had an air show at Reading, and there was a B-17 and P-51, and I could hear this. I knew it was a bomber. Well, and I didn't want to turn around. I said, guys, don't turn, don't look. It'll come in front of us pretty soon. And sure enough, it was a 17, and he came lower and angled so he could get better look. Like, what are those guys? I know he had to see us, and that was pretty chilling.
Yeah.
And that about that same year, there was a guy, he and his wife, and they were in a Jeep, and they slowly passed us by, and they were taking photographs. And I looked at the the license plates frame, and it was a Marine. He stops, she gets out, takes more pictures, and he just looked in the rearview mirror, thumbs up, like, yeah, you guys are doing okay.
Very cool.
So, like, those kind of stories just amazing. Now that was our guy that had to be with us, Tom. And
Oh, is that right? It was
yeah,
the first time. Was that the very first time
probably
since the 30s, she said, or
well, he was the guy. He was
Okay.
with us every year.
okay.
So yeah, Tom Holbrook, and nice guy, but he was from North Carolina. And he says something that just is a little bit chilling about seeing Yankees with fixed bayonets.
Yeah.
But no, he actually wanted us to do another presentation, come down to the march up to the cemetery. Okay, and there was a gentleman who was a major general, and he presented us with a medal because of the 65 units that went there. There were 5 dedicated as being the most safe on the field, with ammunition and talking to people, and we got one of those medals.
Excellent.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of stories that go with this hobby that is just more than just having mock battles, and of course that's what it's going to look like at Conner Prairie.
Is this on the 4th? Is it? How long is this? When does this go on?
3rd, 4th, and 5th.
Okay.
So and as you can see, it's darkly. Why can't I know the guy. I can't. Name won't come to. He is dressed and does the Gettysburg Address.
Okay.
But yeah, we pause for a moment, lower the colors, and then we march out. And I thought I set one with the National Guard.
I don't think I saw
Okay,
that.
maybe
Yeah.
And we march off to the side. At one time it was the Night Owls, and they do the artillery for 1812, and so we present colors to them, shake hands with them, and it's that moment of like the new and the old, and people didn't know about it, until they put the jumbotrons out there, and it showed what happened just over the edge of a hill.
Yeah.
And they go, how long have you been doing that? Since the first time we were out here. Really? We never knew that. But they have 2 or 3 jumbotrons, and people were coming up going, that was interesting. When did you begin doing that? Well, 20 some years ago.
So now I have a question.
Yeah.
Do you have people that are stepping up to join with you guys now so that this will continue?
Not as much as we would hope. I mean, yeah, most units are winking out. It's expensive.
Mhm.
The musket, unless you can find a good used one, they're costly. And something is just not compelling anymore. I don't know what it is, but
Well, like I said, we need to get these stories out to people and then try to get some people to understand it. I would say you probably got some ex-military that might want to continue to honor the program.
many on our unit
Yeah.
were former military. There was something about that camaraderie
Right.
that they miss, and we are all of the same turn of mind. Military kind of is in our DNA, I guess you'd
Right.
say, and you form bonds and friendships, and something that they in civilian life they seem to miss. Um, it's hard to explain, but anything you do, like a football team or baseball, once you've done something as a group, you form relationships, and you've worked at something that gains something.
Right.
Um, Even if you gain respect for each other. If you didn't win lots of games, but you worked at something together, and that's very similar to what we do. But our unit has changed over the years. People have come in, people have gone out. Like I said, health issues. In 25 years, we've had people pass away.
Well, sure.
Yeah,
Let me ask you a question. Was it all right with you if I put your name and contact information on this video? So if
certainly.
anybody's interested in looking into it, they can get a hold of you?
Yeah.
Because I'd love to see this continue
Uh,
on, so,
yeah.
the generations to come. So,
But and we were at kind of that oddball. I mean, everyone's wearing four button sack coats, blue trousers. No one really does dress parade um, as we present it.
yeah. Well, Doug, thank you for coming to this. This was fun.
Nice. Yes,
I
thank
know
you, Rick.
you also told me some things. You teased me about other things you could talk about. We may be getting back to you to do
Oh,
this again, but
as long as people haven't nodded off, while we're talking about this and nerding out over history.
well, that's kind of what we do here at the history of the History Society. So I just want to thank you, Doug. Welcome and thank you for being this, and you're welcome to come to any of our history meetings. So please come do that. So
I think I have a friend that he'll probably watch this. Call him Granny, but Joe Spangler.
Mhm.
I think he mentioned um, going to an event.
Well, I hope so. So we can,
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I
Yes.
appreciate your time. See y'all.
Thank you.